Well, who would actually show up to a message on dying? I mean, it's one thing to talk about Jesus' death, his atoning death, because we know that he was resurrected. That's what we were singing about this morning, right? So, who would come to a message about dying? I want to hear a message about dying, but not just dying. I want to die well. What is death anyway? It's just a small step from one dimension to another. It's an absolute, it's the most sacred and glorious thing a follower of Jesus will ever engage in as he steps into the Jordan and out of this life and into the next realm. It's the most tragic, consequential, significant moment in the life of someone who has rejected Jesus as his king or her king. It can be tragic. For some of you maybe watching here today or otherwise, death is something you stay 1,000,000 miles away from. You don't go to hospitals. You try not to go to memorials or funerals. In fact, I was visiting with a guy this last week, and he said, had a close friend, just refused to go to the memorial. So we fear death. Death is who do they picture death as? The Grim Reaper. And he's got a sickle, and he's got black face, and he shrouds, and he doesn't walk. He just floats through, coming your direction with long, pointy fingers and all those kinds of things. How do we think about death? But more importantly this morning, through our exploration of faith, how would we die with faith? And I want to try to describe that in the context of the Hall of Faith. Now, for those of you who don't know or haven't been here, we've been working through this series about putting spiritual armor on. And one of the things we've been looking at is the shield of faith. And my question to you is, how is your shield of faith? Have you got it up? Is it up high enough to protect you from all the missiles, the flaming darts that the Bible talks about, shot from the cannons or the archery, or however you want to picture that metaphor in today's world, from our adversary, trying to trip you up, trying to make you unfruitful, or trying in an ultimate sense to keep you separated from the Creator of your soul? How would you do that? Well, we walk in faith. So we've been looking at faith. Faith is defined in the Bible. It's the assurance of things hoped for. It's the conviction of things we cannot see. I don't know about you, but I've never seen heaven. I haven't seen it. I don't know. Do I believe it's out there? Well, I believe it's already here in some ways. The kingdom of heaven, if you want to talk about it, or the kingdom of God, depending on who you're looking through the lens of. Matthew talking sometimes about the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, differently than others from a Jewish perspective or otherwise. But how would you think about it? Well, it's a dimension in which God's rule and reign is over all things. Nothing's allowed to enter. No unclean thing is allowed to enter into the presence. So that's true in some senses because His rule and reign is already here in my heart. But for sure, there is the reality that there is a place. Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. And I don't know how exactly that works, because we also understand that it's a new heavens and a new earth. I don't know what that looks like. Are these construction things happening and somehow they'll be ushered in from out in this other dimension into the new heavens and new earth? I don't know exactly how that works. I can speculate, but I don't know exactly how that works. But it's a dimension that I live for every single day, or so is my intention. Do I find myself all day, every day, thinking only of things above and not of things on earth? No, I can't say that I do. But it's my intention to set my mind on things above, not on things on the earth. So I am setting my mind on the things that I am assured of and the things that I am convicted of. And this is the very definition of faith. My salvation, yes, but many more things other than that. And yet faith is what? Well, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Is that just the eternal realm, or should I have faith in things right here on the earth? I think it's both. To quote my favorite, my good friend, who is my little friend? Forrest Gump. I'm sorry, I had a senior moment there. My best friend, what's his name? Forrest Gump. Which is it? Should you be having faith for eternal things, or you should be having faith for temporal things? And as Forrest Gump would say, well, I think it's a little bit of both. And I've said that before because the Bible is a little bit of both in so many different dimensions. And what would that mean? Of course, I believe in my eternal reality, living with the Creator of the universe, in His presence, under His rule, under His reign. Of course I believe that. But I also have faith for things that are here now because God's spoken to me and promised me certain things. And I believe in those things now, not just in the future. I believe in those things now. And I use faith to access those things now. Now, if you do this a little bit too much, you can move into the word of faith movement, where if you just have enough faith and everybody's going to get well and all these things happen in a temporal sense. Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those things that God promised me, shows me in the Spirit, things that I want to, have been called to walk into. I am here through faith. I was here. God put this vision in many of our hearts years ago before this ever existed. We couldn't see it, but we were convicted of it, and we walked in faith. And through those experiences, guess what happens? My shield goes up. As that song says again, just to kind of give you an up-to-date picture, I've seen too much. I've seen too much. My shield is high. I'm not saying it's impenetrable, because occasionally darts hit me, and I'm wiped out for a little bit. Not in an ultimate way, but I have setbacks. Nobody's exempt from some setbacks in this life. However, the more I walk with Him and I watch, and as I watch these things unpacked before my very eyes come into the seen realm, they started in the unseen realm, and to get from there to where we are now has taken faith. And to get from where we are today to where God is taking us as a church, as individuals, as couples, as marrieds, as young people, before you even have your career, wherever you are, it will require faith. Faith, faith, faith. Because those who believe in God, as we saw in verse 6, Hebrews 11, those who believe in God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. And then you can add in by faith, by faith, by faith. Do you want more faith? Well, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. So you're ready to dive in. We're going to dive in. And you say, well, what would this have to do with the Hall of Faith? Where is this? Well, the next little passage is just short, and it's fascinating to me because we're going to be dealing with Jacob, who would become Israel. We're going to be dealing with Isaac, his father, and then we're going to be dealing with Joseph as well. There's 3 generations, and these guys did some extraordinary faith acts, amazing faith acts. But guess what? For whatever reason, Paul chose their very end of life. He chose that moment that they were dying to add into the Hall of Faith. Couldn't he have chosen something more significant during their lives? I mean, think about it. Think about if you're writing a biography, and you were writing a biography about, I don't know, Tiger Woods, and you didn't mention any of his majors, you didn't mention any of his crazy exploits, you just mentioned the fact that he died. That would not be a well-written biography, would it? And yet, this is what he includes. So, if you will, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 20. Just a few sentences about 3 generations of patriarchs who walked incredible lives of faith. And they had their challenges as well. Verse 20 says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even regarding things to come. That's it? That's all I get from Isaac? Abraham, son, Isaac, through whom the promise was going to be given, through whom God says, in your seed, He reconfirms the covenant He gave to Abraham in Genesis 12. In your seed, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. All this stuff. And Isaac, he walked in such, it's an incredible life of faith. And all he includes in the Hall of Faith was that he blessed Jacob and Esau. That's it? That's it? Really? And then verse 21. By faith, Jacob, as he was dying. There's something in here for us. Listen to me. You may be we've got some young folks over on this side. Everybody look over there. Got some young folks over there. There's something here for us today. Even if you think you're years away from dying, get a hold of this. There's some power here. As he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. So, right? I mean, here's an old man. He's confined to the bed now. As one of our, we like this gal, Leanne Morgan or whatever her name is, and she talks a little bit about Jesus, and she uses this term, take to the bed. I just came home and just take to the bed. And she's got that Tennessee accent. Well, he just took to the bed, and he could barely even get up, and he couldn't see nothing. And he lifts himself up out of his bed and reaches over for his staff to stable him, and he blesses the sons of Joseph, and then he dies. Why is that included? I'm asking you the question, why is that included as one of the great acts of faith? And then verse 22, by faith Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. What is all that? There has to be something here. So let's do a deep dive. I'm just going to give you just a little bit of history before, rather than going back and trying to read all this. Just a little bit of history. We first see that if you know the story, many of you have seen, even on, I think it's, one of the New York Times, one of the great things that everybody goes in, New York Times, New York City, where they go and watch these amazing things. Joseph's multicolored coat, all this kind of stuff. Joseph had a vision, he had a dream, and he saw what was essentially, symbolically, his brothers bowing down to him eventually, and that the whole world was going to be bowing down, and he shared it with his dad, and his dad rebuked him. And then he shared it with his brothers, and they got really upset. And then they end up selling him to slavery. He goes to Egypt, if you know the story, and then he's falsely accused. He's put in prison. It's just one thing after another, after another, after another, and this is Joseph. But eventually, through God's providence and his wisdom, God's wisdom through Joseph and his acuity to understand, be faithful, be faithful, be faithful, he ends up saving not only all of Egypt and some of the surrounding countries and people around, the people groups around him, but his own family would be saved by his heroics of faith walking through all that. It's just an amazing story. And then in chapter 46, finally, as he's risen up to the second in charge, he's the main guy in Egypt outside of the Pharaoh himself. Egypt is the superpower here at this point. He brings his whole family back. And again, there are other parts of this story that are phenomenal, but he brings his dad back and all of his brothers. And his dad is who? Well, you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob is renamed Israel. We get that because he has this incredible encounter with Jesus. I believe it's a Christophany, or at least a theophany. It's God in human flesh, and he wrestles with him till daybreak. And he renames him Israel and no longer Jacob. And so he's had these encounters with God. So now Jacob is being brought back at the age of 130. Now, some of you may scoff at this, but there is good scientific grounding to believe there were times in our recent past that some of these biblical dates of how long these people lived, this is not just myth. This is a high probability that, well, I believe it because it's in the Bible, but even people who maybe say it's speculation. He lived to be 130 and thought he had a very long life. So when Pharaoh asked him, where do you come from? What's going on? He goes, well, I'm 130 years old. And then he describes his life in this way. But my years have been few, and they've been very unpleasant. And if you know the story of Jacob become Israel, you will know that it was a challenging life. He got ripped off by his father-in-law. He had to basically work for him for virtual free to get to marry these two daughters of Laban. And all these things happened in his life. And he's a wanderer, and he lives in tents. And now he's coming to the superpower. It's like New York City, right? I mean, he's living out in Nowheresville, town of, 3, population of 3 with no stoplight, not even a stop sign to get through your town. And now he's coming to New York City, which at that point would have been Egypt. And he's standing before in the scene realm, the most powerful person on the planet, Pharaoh, who could instantly, have him wiped out or could elevate him or could provide for him. He doesn't know. My years have been few and my life has been unpleasant. What kind of person are you? Well, we were herders, we just were out with the sheep and lived in, kind of wandering people. That was not a popular thing to say in Egypt. Those people, they didn't even want him near them. That would have been the lowest of the lows. This is the superpower. And yet, Joseph had told him, go ahead and tell him what you are, because you are what you are. And it actually ended up being a protective thing for them. So he lived another 17 years. And they lived in a place called Goshen, which is not just emblematic of Egypt. It's a portion of Egypt. It would have been up near the delta on the Nile and kind of the north eastern part of that part of the world of Egypt. And it was part of Egypt, though, Goshen. And that was where they were going to settle. And they did. And he lived out this very prosperous. Nobody was going to put their hand against him. He'd have to worry about the guy next door or the tribe next door coming in and killing him, because his son was Joseph, and Joseph was the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. All Joseph would have to do, nobody would touch him. He was living in the lap of luxury for the last 17 years of his life. Now, that's an important addition, by the way, because many of us would be living in that maybe something similar, kind of the lap of luxury towards the end of our lives. We've worked hard, you've saved, you've done all these different things, and now you find yourself in a place like this. And it's luxurious, and you want to think about traveling, going places, and having fine meals, and all the different things. You can imagine that his senses might be dulled at this point about eternal things, about the things that he used to dream of when he had nothing else to dream of, when his life was so unpleasant and he was clinging to these old covenants that his father had passed down, in this sense a land covenant to Abraham, that there's a day when I'm going to give you all this land. That would be a temporal promise. And he'd set his heart on it. And it wasn't wavering. Yeah, he was in Egypt, but it didn't mean anything to him. Not in an ultimate sense. He was happy to be there and happy to be provided for. But it really didn't drive him. Genesis 47, verse 29. Okay, that's a little bit of the background. It's a little bit of where we are now in the story. And now he's right at the end of his life, and he's trying to kind of pull this together a little bit. And here he is in verse 29. And when the time for Israel to die drew near. Now, that's going to happen to all of us, by the way. And I love this, and much of this I read and reread Charles Spurgeon's message on this particular passage and on death itself. Listen to what he says. When he was dying, death is a thorough test of faith, Charles Spurgeon said. Beneath the touch of the skeleton finger, shams dissolve into thin air and only truth remain. Unless indeed a strong delusion has been given, and then the spectacle of a presumptuous sinner passing away in his iniquities is one which might make angels weep. It's hard. It's very hard to maintain a lie in the presence of the last solemnities. The end of life is usually the close of self-deception. There is a mimic faith, a false assurance which lasts under all ordinary heats of trial, but this evaporates when the fires of death surround it. I've been in those situations. I've been at a lot of bedsides. I've had men so scared they barely could control themselves. I've seen grieving to the point of beyond excess. I mean, I've just seen people lose their minds when either a spouse or someone was dying. I understand grief, don't get me wrong, and I understand some people are more emotive than others, but I've seen stark fear at bedsides, especially when the recognition is that my faith, do I even have any faith? Have I lived for the King? Do I even believe this stuff? Where will I go? What's going to happen to me? And all of a sudden, well, all those other things just kind of fall to the side. All that bravado, all that, I don't need God. I don't believe in God. I'm fine with everybody's dies, and it just is what it is. And I'm going to be fine with it. It's not what I've found at bedsides. I usually see stark terror, or I see a sacred event. I want your dying to be a sacred event. How will that happen? Well, I can tell you how it's going to happen. It's going to happen in 3 ways. And again, I'm just going to take from Charles Spurgeon because I can't do it better. I was going to take 2 of these, but he adds 1. When you die, you need 3 things. You want to have an attitude of blessing. You want to be blessing the future generations. Now, that can mean your literal progeny, your kids, but some of you don't have kids or grandkids or whatever. That's fine too. Your spiritual progeny. All of us should have some spiritual progeny, some people that we have invested heavily in, whether that's finances, time, treasure, talent, or whatever it is, to see them come to know Jesus. And so there should be an attitude of blessing towards those around you and blessing the Lord of sorts. It's a beautiful thing if you have that as an attitude. Number 2 should be worship, and we see that in Hebrews 11. He leaned on his staff as he was worshiping. Are you a worshiper, and what would that look like if you were a worshiper? And lastly, you need to go out with attitude, man. You're not an Egyptian. That's essentially what both Joseph and Jacob and all of them are saying. I'm not an Egyptian. Now, this is not about, don't think temporarily, maybe you're watching on here and, oh, I'm an Egyptian, what can I do, We're not talking about that. An Egyptian represented a culture that lived under the worship of false gods. And he was like, I'm not part of that. I don't care about the luxury. I don't care about the protection. I don't care about any of that. My eyes are set on something different. So when the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, Please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt. Why is he pleading this? Why does this really matter? I mean, you're buried where you're buried. What difference does it make? To him it meant a lot because of the promises to his grandfather. His grandfather was Abraham. Abraham had been promised a land flowing with milk and honey, and Abraham never saw that. Isaac never saw that. And he knows that he's not now going to see that, but he's living as if it's still part of his calling. He's a people. He's the progenitor of all kinds of people under him, and they will see under this covenant the beautiful future. Now, I can tell you this too. Do you live under a different covenant? Not a land covenant, but do you live under the covenant of the blood? Are you so confident that when you breathe your last, this will not be your last day of existence, it will be your first day of existence in perfection? If you are so consumed with that covenant, it runs through your mind every day, all day, you'll also be a worshiper. You will be a worshiper. And you will be blessing future generations. You will be thinking about what are going to happen in generations after me. Can I touch people here in the Coachella Valley? Can I invest $1 in a child, maybe at a camp? Or can I invest $1 in building a sanctuary where people could, I want to bless them. I want them to understand and see the Creator of the universe through these platforms. And I worship. Oh, it's beautiful. I worship. And then listen to what he says. He says, don't bury me in Egypt, but when I lie down with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial places. He wanted to be buried with his ancestors. Now, again, this is symbolic for us. It doesn't really matter where you're buried. You may have a preference on one place or another. It's not about your temporal body. This is, as 1 Corinthians 10 says, Paul says, all these things that they were walking through were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages would come. Now, that means they came out of Egypt, we come out of the world. Their taskmaster was Pharaoh, ours is Satan. They went through the Red Sea, we go through our baptism. We talk about this all the time. It's a template by which we can know the roadmap to get to the heavenly Jerusalem, the presence of God. This is a picture for us to help us on our own sojourn through this brief and momentary life filled with affliction. But it's only momentary and light affliction according to Paul's letter to the Corinthians. And he said, I will do as you have said, Joseph says. And he said, swear to me. So he swore to him, and then Israel bowed in worship at the head of his bed. Now, it's interesting because it doesn't say he leaned on his staff. Just a quick aside here. There are two Hebrew words here, and if you've studied Hebrew at all, so there's miteh, which is like a staff, and there's mitah, which is a bed. And so Paul's probably quoting the Septuagint that took that as the staff, that he was leaning on his staff. So who has it right? Is Moses have it right in the Hebrew here, or was it mitah or miteh, whatever? And I love what Spurgeon says. Spurgeon simply says it's probably a little bit of both. Probably he was in his bed, because who can say that Paul got it wrong, or who can say that Moses got it wrong? He probably leaned himself, propped himself, and what else would he have had to prop himself up other than his staff? New Testament says staff, Old Testament says he leaned himself up in bed. I think it's both. Clearly he was in bed. He was dying. He's not out skipping around in the flowers. He's dying. It's at the very end. And it's going to be, well, he's going to bless, he's going to worship, and he's going to go out with attitude. Okay? Now, let's fast forward. Genesis 48. Verse 1. Now it came about after these things that Joseph was told, behold, your father is sick. So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now this is important too. So Joseph was one of his sons that would become the 12 tribes. You probably, if you don't, it's fine that you don't know this. But out of this was derived the 12 tribes. Asher and Dan and Judah and Benjamin, all these different tribes. But Joseph now is going to become two tribes. He's going to get a double portion, which really only was supposed to go to the first son, but now it's going to Joseph at the end of the line here. A little bit like David, a little bit like many other things that you see, Jacob and Esau. Same thing. The younger rules over the older. It's just God saying, don't, just because you've been born into a certain situation, don't think God can't turn anything. So you're born on the other side of the tracks, I can flip you right to the other side of the tracks. Anytime I want. I'm sovereign. Now, watch what happens here, because this is powerful. So here they come, and Joseph is coming with his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, who are these? These are sons that he had while married. If you can imagine and know the story, I don't have time to get into it this morning. Potiphar's daughter had been married to Joseph, and they had these two kids. All these two kids knew their whole life. Well, they were growing up at the Hideaway, man. They were growing up at the Vintage Club, at one of these fancy clubs. It's all they knew. They thought, bottled water was just free everywhere. They didn't know, all they knew was luxury. Their pops was the most powerful man outside of Pharaoh in the most powerful place. They had more advantage than you can imagine. And here's their, who? Our grandpa? Wanting to do what? I can imagine what these two kids would have been saying. We're going all the way to Goshen? Why don't we stay here in New York City? Why do we have to go all the way out there with the sheep herders? And yet, his dad was sick, so he made the trip. Verse 2 says, and when it was told to Jacob, behold, your son Joseph has come to you, Israel collected his strength and sat up in the bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. There were two different times he was impacted. First, chapter 28 of Genesis, he has this encounter and you've heard of stairways that he has to heaven, sees angels ascending and descending, and all this very powerful encounter that he has. And God reconfirms the covenant with Jacob that he'd given to his father Abraham. Like in your seed now, because you're the seed of Abraham, the seed of promise, but in your seed all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Now remember, this is very important. This is much more than just a land promise, a land covenant promise. Now I don't know exactly what's going through Jacob's head, but I can only imagine, having wandered through those valleys and looking after sheep and living in tents and having pretty unpleasant life, serving his father-in-law for his wives, and all this kind of thing is very difficult. I can imagine he had a lot of time, once he wasn't scrolling on his iPhone, I can imagine he had a lot of time to think about what had happened and what his father had said and what was all this about and what his grandfather had said and what this angel who appeared to him had said. I'm going to give you this land, temporal, and in your seed, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Eternal. I think he's thinking both, folks. I think he's thinking both. And he goes on and he says, behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I will make you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. Now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, they're mine. Can you imagine that? How would that go over if you went to your maybe son-in-law or your son and said, by the way, your kids are mine? How would you respond to that? And he says, Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, just as much as Reuben and Simeon are. And if you know the end of the story, both Manasseh and Ephraim they become tribal heads. You know, half of Manasseh was on one side of the Jordan, the other half of the tribe over here, and then Ephraim was in the land. You know, it was really a powerful thing. And so it really happened. It worked out that way. You know, you got to remember, they won't end up actually physically going into the land, although they did go bury his bones in the place that had been designated. But before that, what had happened? Well, they weren't ever going to get there. But he said, these kids are mine. And they're going to be living with the same kind of thing running through their veins that I got running through my veins. And so I got to bless them. I want to pass on a spiritual legacy. And again, if you don't have kids or grandkids or whatever, this can be done. It doesn't have to just be your physical descendants. In fact, I would say your spiritual descendants are every bit as much important as your literal progeny. That's my hope. I will try to be fruitful. What does that mean? I want to help as many people in their faith walk. I want to bless you with your ability to understand how to walk with God. And in that sense, I have some spiritual children. I am the spiritual child of other men that have walked before me. Charles Spurgeon's one of them. Among many other writers, I consider them in some ways spiritual fathers because they've blessed me by helping me understand some of these passages. Does that make sense? Okay, so they're mine. Chapter 48, verse 15. So here it goes. Are you ready? This is beautiful. I hope you're not losing me here. I just want you to walk away with this. If you're going to go out, you go out fighting. You go out blessing people. You go out worshiping. And you go out with an attitude. Don't be grumpy old people. I saw something on the internet this last week, and it was an old man talking to other old people, and it looked AI generated, but it was pretty powerful anyway. And he was talking about that, and he goes, why don't younger people want to be around older people? And he goes, older people don't recognize that all they talk about is their aches and pains, their doctor's appointments, and when they're going, and what that's going to look like. And that's all because they're so consumed with it, out of the heart, the mouth flows, right? These words flow out of whatever's in your heart. If in your heart is the new covenant, and where you're going, and what you want to deposit in your children and your grandchildren and your spiritual children and all these different things, if that's consuming you, that's going to be flowing out, and young people are going to want to be around you. You're going to become a mentor and a sage as opposed to just a lecture person or a complainer and a whiner. I don't want that. Do you? And I catch myself in it already with my kids and my grandkids, and I'm like, snap out of it. Bless them. What do I have to bless them with? That's a good question. What does this old man have to bless them with anything? He's old, he's feeble. He says he's got nothing to bless him with. What's he going to bless him with? Guy's crazy. Somehow he believed he was God's ambassador to the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. Until you get this attitude, you won't die well. Do you see your life now as being of import to other people that you don't even know generations from now? Do you think, let's just take Church of the Red Door. Do you think I'm going to see everything that's going to happen at Church of the Red Door? I'm old. I'm going to hang on there as long as I can. But if we get this campus filled, and by faith we will get this campus built, if we get this campus built, generations from now are going to be impacted. I'm blessing those future generations by engaging in what I am doing today, and that makes me happy. People think he's nuts. I don't care. I don't care. It's like Jesus said. They thought he was a drunkard and a glutton, and then they accused John the Baptist of being crazy and all this. And Jesus simply responds, wisdom is vindicated by her children. Are you thinking about your future children that will be impacted by your life? Is your last act the best? Why did Paul choose this? Why did he choose these scenes of dying? Why not something grander when they were young and virile and ready to roll? He chose it because, well, it's a little bit like that first miracle. The wine just keeps getting better. Save the best for last. See, if you see yourself, again, I've been teaching on this through Ecclesiastes, and you're looking at this line where your health is going bad and your cognitive things are diminishing and this and that. If you look at that, you'll think you have nothing to offer. You will not bless anybody. You'll just say, I'm just trying to get out of the way so you can get the money. Right? No, don't have that attitude. Be on this line where things are going from glory in glory, where you're being renewed day by day. Your spirit's being renewed, but your body's falling apart. You want on that line, or you want on your body falling apart? It doesn't take me long to be around somebody and know they're on the line mentally that's falling apart, that's taking a dive. And then you can be with someone with the exact same ailments, the same predicament, and they're on this line, and you love being around them, and they're vibrant. Yeah, they're suffering. Their days are unpleasant. It's not easy to die, but their brain is somewhere else. They're not here. They're here, but they're not here. Their brain is on this line, and that thing is being renewed, and they're getting closer to the King. They should be happier. That's what Paul says. I desire to depart and be absent from the body and present with the Lord, but there's still stuff for me to do on the earth. Now that's preaching. So, or yelling, I don't know, you determine that. You have to determine that. Okay, so if this is true, how did he bless Joseph? Watch what he says. It's only a few lines. Is this such a big deal to include? Of all of his faith acts, he's leaning on his staff, worshiping, and saying these things. The God before whom my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, walked, his grandpa and his dad. The God who has what? Been my shepherd all my life to this day. See what you're doing when you say that. You're giving testimony. You see that? Do you want your kids to see a grumpy old complaining person going out? Is that what you want to see them to see, the last vestiges of your life? Or how upset you are about your physical challenges? How upset you are at the world who doesn't understand what's going on, and the iPhone's ruining everything, and the country's falling apart. All those things may or may not be true. But is that the blessing you want to give to your kids and your grandkids? Or do you want to say this? God, Psalm 23, right? He's been my shepherd. Here's how. I want my kids to know. Shepherd. You see that? Verse 16. The angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. Now that's very interesting language to hear. Who is the angel? He had an encounter with the angel of the Lord. Not an angel, the angel. I am convinced, as most scholars are, and I don't consider myself a scholar, but most scholars are, that this is a theophany, a Christophany. It's Jesus, pre-incarnate Jesus, as the angel of the Lord. There's good reason to believe this. So what happens is, he says he's redeemed me. How does he know about redemption? How does he know the seed that's going to bless the nations has actually bought him back, ransomed him back? Strange language. He's redeemed me. And may my name live on in them. I want my kids to have a shepherd. Spiritual, literal, otherwise. I want them to have a shepherd. I want them to be redeemed. And what will happen? And that's the last part. And the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. What does that mean? You just want to have a lot of kids? That may be where he was thinking. But I think he was thinking something even beyond that. If I am part of the story to the point that multitudes of people will be born again and come in and live and worship their Creator, that's what I think he's thinking about. Not just a land promise with a lot of his great-great-great-grandkids running around. I think he's thinking towards the eternal here because he used redemption. Does that? So, now as we wind this thing down, Genesis 49. I need 4 hours here, but I'm only going to take 3. So, no, I'm not. Relax, relax. Verse 28, Genesis 49. These are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said when he blessed them. He blessed them. Now he went beyond Manasseh and Ephraim and blesses all of his own kids, his sons. And he blessed them with a blessing appropriate to him. Now, what does that mean? Well, a parent can just kind of see where kids are going, their gifts, their aptitudes. If you're aware, you kind of know what your kids are built for. You just are. Who better to speak into their lives? But it's also true with your spiritual descendants. Who better to speak into a spirit? When I see people come to know the Lord, I just observe and watch over a while, and then I want to bless them by saying, you know what, you're an evangelist. You know what, you're a teacher. You know what, and bless them. Speak prophetically, if you will, into their future by observation. I like to do that a lot. And as I've done that under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, I always say, God has a very special, God loves you very much. And Jeff Cranford has a great plan for your life. But no, I actually stole that from Myrna Anderson. She used to say that all the time, one of our original founders. But you got to understand, there is something you can speak. This is blessing. And by worship is you're giving your testimony. And you're grateful. You have an attitude of gratefulness. My shepherd's been with me my whole life. It's a testimony and it's gratitude. And he's redeemed me. And if that is coursing through your veins, you don't think your spiritual descendants or your physical descendants are going to watch that. People say, I've got kids who don't know the Lord. I've got grandkids and they're running 1,000,000 miles away. What should I do? Pray, number 1, believe in faith, and number 2, live your life with the covenant running through the course of your veins. Don't get caught up in luxurious Palm Springs or Aspen. Those are the 2 places I've lived. Who cares? Have the attitude that was in the forefathers. I want to see multitudes redeemed. And if you have that attitude, young people are going to want to be around you. And you'll have an impact. Now, as we close, let's just go to verse 32 here, guys. He says, they purchased it from the sons of Health, verse 33. Jacob finished charging his sons, drew his feet into his bed, and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. What a way to go out. Don't leave me here. I'm not an Egyptian. What would happen in the future, some 400 or 500 years in the future? I tell you exactly what would happen. Moses would come onto the scene, and he would say, apply the blood of the lamb, this unblemished lamb, to your door. That's why we're church at the red door. And he said, when you take that lamb and you slaughter it, he says, and this is a picture of Jesus in the future, I want you to do this. I want you to gird your loins. It's kind of what we're talking about, gird your loins with truth. Gird your loins. This is prefiguring of what we're talking about. Gird your loins, and then put your staff in your hand as you eat it. In other words, I don't belong here. I'm a wanderer. I'm a tribal person. I'm not planting my thing here. I don't own a house. This has got to be my house. This is my deal, and this is my properties and all that. No. It's fine if you own that. Fine. And I'd say use it for the kingdom, wherever the Lord leads you. And I'd just say, but you're ready to roll, and then eat it in haste. This is the attitude. If you want Jacob's attitude and you want to die like this must be your attitude. Because what will happen is if you're too firmly entrenched with your now and your here and your temporal and getting everything perfect for yourself, then you'll fear death because it'll be the end of what you're working at. If you're like, hey, I'm just living here, but I'm really living for that up there, then you'll be, I welcome death. But I'm not a masochist, but I just want the Lord to use me until my path's done, and then, Lord, please take me. And I don't have to cling to life and cling to it like, I'm losing everything. You are losing everything if that's where your mind is. But if your mind is already up there, you're not losing anything. You're about to gain everything. That's why it's sacred. Do you see that? It's so easy and yet so complex because we cling to what we can see. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things we can't see. If you don't have faith, you cannot die well. You cannot. You will not. And then lastly, in closing, I know it's been a little long. I could have made this a 58-part series, but I chose not to because I'm already lost in 4 other series that will never finish until Jesus comes back. But anyway, Genesis 50. Now Joseph, remember, Isaac leaned on his staff and worshiped and blessed him. Don't leave me here, whatever you do. Joseph says something similar, and this is what closes out Genesis. Genesis 50 is the opening book in your Bible, if you're unaware, and it was the last chapter written. After that, they would go into slavery, someone would rise up, and then the whole pattern emerges, and it's very helpful for us to understand. But Joseph says something similar, and listen to the context. Joseph said to his brothers, verse 24, Genesis 50, I am about to die. Again, death scenes, really? Is this their big act of faith? Yes. It's the culmination of a life with problems and challenges, but the best act is the last act. It's the closing one. This is going to be the best wine in my life. Do you believe that? Or do you believe your best wine was back in the 50s when I used to have my leather jacket and I was really big on the football team and I used to date all the cheerleaders and they all loved me, as your wife lovingly rolls her eyes, but you live in that world. Don't live in that world. Live in the world to come. Live there. How meaningful. That's how you die well. Live there. Listen to what he says. I'm about to die, but God will surely take care of you, bring you up from this land to the land he had promised an oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. They didn't do it until much later. So Joseph died at the age of 110. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. See, what this says is many of them died without ever really seeing the promises. Well, why was he so interested in getting his bones back? I have a theory, and we'll close with this. Matthew chapter 27. You want to die well? Die like this. Don't worry about your bones. Don't freak out about that. This is deep. There's a lesson here deeper than where your literal bones are going to be. It really doesn't matter. But where your spiritual bones are. If you'll remember the story of Elisha, right? the end of his life, they threw him into a hole, and there were some bones in there, some guys, and he came to life through those bones. Do you realize? Ezekiel says the same thing. When people touch my bones, the remnants of my life, I want them to come alive. Right? You see that? This is so weird. If it wasn't in the Bible, I'd just say, that's so weird. Verse 50. A lot of people don't know this. The speculation, fill in the blanks here. Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the veil of the temple torn in two. Why? Signifying we had direct access to God now. Exodus 33 says no man can see the face of God and live. He's an awful thing. Why? Because we're in such a state of disrepair, and he's so holy and pure. But it was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split, and the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after the resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. So what would happen with the Jewish people? Many would reject Jesus as the Messiah. Tragic mistake. But many would embrace him, and many are embracing him today. And what is that word? That word has gone out to all the nations. There's not a nation on the earth that doesn't have people that say, I'm a Jesus person. I follow Jesus. He's my king. I'm a Jesus person. I love Jesus. I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus. No, not a tribe, a tongue, no people anywhere on the planet Earth today, and there's none of them. You won't find somebody that's a spiritual descendant of Abraham by faith. And this, my friends, is I think what Jacob, why they were included. Because they made it to the end. They made it with blessing. They made it with worship. And they made it with attitude. And as a result, we're touching their bones today, if you will. The remnants of their life still speak. Do you want the remnants of your life to speak of the glory of Jesus through a life well lived? If you don't pursue, even if maybe you're on your deathbed and you're hearing this for your first time, you can still turn to the Creator of the universe and go out with blessing and worship and an attitude. But if you have 20 years left, or 10 years left, or 5 years left, or 50 years left, live it for the King. And if you do, it'll be so firmly entrenched in your brain that it'll come out of your mouth and you will die well. Do you want that? Amen. I want that. I want that.